Quarters for Prosperity. So let me I can get everybody's face up. There we go. Oh, what's happened? No. Okay, that's better. Good. Good. So, welcome to Book Club. So, just switch my light on so you can hopefully see me a bit better. Yeah, welcome to, I think, Damien and Steve. It's your first visits along, so welcome to you guys. And so you sort of a little bit about what we're all about. It's going to work. Well, there we go. So it's really just to help with our continual development. And I've always found that when you read a book, you absorb some of it, but there's often bits you miss. And if a number of people read it, they'll pick other bits. They'll take different insights to a book, and then we can sort of really benefit from that group learning sort of aspect. And sometimes talking things through bits we're not too sure on can reinforce that learning. So hopefully a bit of edutainment, as we like to call it. So this month's book, and I think it might be certainly a couple of months, if not we'll run this to the end of the year, because it is quite a sizable book. It's I think who's got it on audio? I think
that'd be me.
Is it about 5? Is it 5 hours on audio?
5.5 hours.
5.5 hours on audio. So it's a good old chunky read. There is a cheap version. There is an hour version, but we want to get the depth of knowledge from the book. So this is our book. So Stephen Covey, deceased a few years back, 2012. And I didn't realise it. Pretty much, this was the only book he wrote. So, but I suppose when it's that big, it takes a few years to write it. And he's an interesting character. I've listened to him. I never get to see him live. I've seen him sort of on video. Quite a dry presentation style. Not one of the best. His son. Stephen Covey Jr. Has written a couple of books, and he's even drier than his dad. So they're really hard work. His son's books, but always a lot of depth, a lot of detail that goes into them. So because there is so much into this book, I normally sort of write a few bits and pieces on it, but I thought we'd probably go through each of us. What we got out of each chapter, and then talk about that, and then move around. So who would, I think before they get on to the sort of the 7 habits, there's a bit of a forward type thing, the inside out, talking about it. So let's start with Sabrina.
I knew you were going to say that. I got to the end of the 3rd habit at 1:45 this morning.
Oh, right.
I have made some notes as I've gone along in the book, and pencil lines, but they're not as concise as I would like them to be.
Yeah.
But let's just say, because I was the one that suggested this.
You were?
I've been reading these sort of books, believe it or not, with a big gap since 1995, and this was always one that must have been on a list somewhere because I knew about it. I'd heard about it, and it just struck me as being a sort of core book. And Kevin had mentioned it the night before the last book club on another seminar, and I thought, yes, I must do that one. So that was the reason I suggested it. And I think the first chapter that's Inside Out.
Inside Out, yeah.
Yes, paradigms. I remember learning the sort of definition of the word paradigm. I still can't explain it, but I know in my mind what it means, and it does seem to cover a whole lot of concepts, fixed concepts, and when you get those on board, and then you look at not the world around you, but yourself inside. Basically, everything we do should come from inside us, and something that I've said for many years, and I still need to work on actually practicing what I preach, is the fact that we have no control over what happens to us, but we do have control over the way we react.
Yeah.
And I've tried to teach my children that. I've even taught my dad, bless him, he's now 89, but he's understood the principle. And it's making a huge difference to what are clearly his last few years. And I think that's what, as soon as I read that first bit, I knew this was going to be a good book for me. And it sort of locked everything else that's come afterwards in place. Hope that helps a bit.
Yeah. That's not nicely done. So yeah, so really looking at this as I suppose, you know, I mean, this is why I sort of came up with this slide, was the, you know, there's principles and values. So, you know, principles are external. There's sort of the universal laws. You know, we talk a lot about that in Action Coach. You know, universal laws, be, do, have, the formula for change. These things apply across, doesn't matter who you are, where you are, they apply. And then you've got your internal stuff, your internal beliefs, you know, those sort of, you know, your beliefs, your values. You remember the identity iceberg side of things. So Andy, what sort of stood out for you in that first section?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that the you know, the paradigms thing is an interesting way of looking at it. It's thinking about the perspectives of other people as well as those of yourself, and the fact that, you know, a lot of miscommunication and that sort of thing can result just from different people having different viewpoints and a different sort of model of the world, I think, as he puts it, because that's how we you know, we don't see the world necessarily as it is. We see it through a lens that is our paradigm. The sort of no shortcuts, sort of a key point, I guess. All of this sort of personality ethic that he talks about, so the quick fixes that, you know, fundamentally don't address the problem, and, you know, you've got to, you've got to take the long route and actually, you know, fix the fundamentals rather than just kind of tinkering on the surface. Yeah, all seems to make sense.
Steve, what about anything for you? Who managed to get the pictures right? I think I've got it was one of the pictures there. What were you seeing in this one, Steve? The beautiful girl or the wizened old lady? Oh, you're on mute, Steve.
I have to be completely honest, so I did the audio book, so I didn't actually get the pictures.
Ah, okay. Well, there you go.
But this is the first time I've seen this. So,
so what are you seeing? Are you seeing the wizened old lady or the beautiful girl?
Yeah, I do see the old lady sort of at the first instance, yeah. I remember listening to that bit where he said, obviously, sort of a split between the group. Half people saw one, half saw the other, and it depends when they showed it to which people saw which image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it does sort of explain that sort of a bit of the paradigm. You know, you see what you want to see. You know, and if your thoughts are that way, then it can be hard to switch around. Did anybody find it difficult to see both? You could sort of, once you know that they're there, you can switch quite easily to the other one.
Yeah, I can see them both.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that to me was, yeah, it was a really good way to look at this. So we got this sort of, you know, oh, blimey. You should never borrow slides from other people. Well, it doesn't really come out that clear, is it? So you got our personality on the top and our character underneath. So we think within Action Coach we use something a little bit more robust than this, that the identity iceberg, that our behavior, so what we see on the surface is driven by the skills, beliefs, values, and our identity, which what sort of sits underneath. So, you know, we can, you know, we can have a certain character and a personality, something that is seen on the outside, and we can change it. You know, we can learn to change, but it has to come, I think, as Sabrina said, from within. You know, we're going to look at that true identity, those values that we hold dear, and challenge them and look at them and see, you know, what do we need to do. So this was your sort of. Apologise when I put this. Can you hear the noise? Oh, God for that. it was. I did this without having any sound on, and it was some horrible car screeching noises as they came in. I'm glad it's just my end. So this is our sort of, you know, paradigms. It's our map. You know, when I did my NLP course, you know, they sort of said, you know, your vision of the world, you're looking at a map of the world. It's not the reality. You know, it's something you've created. And you might get it right. It might be a true depiction of what's going on, but often it leaves out little details. It misses things. It's a summation of what's going on. And the more that we drive that, the more we just sort of stick with one way, the more we miss what could be out there as well. And that's why we sort of say that, you know, working with coaches really helps with that, because you've got other people, another perspective. That's why groups will always work better than individuals, because you've got a multi view of the world. And that paradigm shift, you know, when you do get that aha moment, you know, we call them BFOs, blinding flashes of the obvious. You know, you go, yeah, of course it happens like that. You know, that's generally you having that sort of shift in your viewpoints. So Gary, what was your take on this slide? This one here. How did you sort of, what did you take from that?
Yes, that's like you say, it's the taking the separate parts, or the different aspects of who you are, and what you do, sort of thing. You know, they say, you know, you are what you do, sort of thing. So, you know, creating yourself from, you know, not only, you know, the knowledge and skills, but also your values. You know, it's living to those values if you can.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I thought the book was quite deep in some places, sort of thing. It's
yeah,
quite self-reflective.
Yeah, I think definitely it was one of the first books I read, and it really was you know, if you open up to it, you can really sort of, you know, see a lot of yourself in there, and things that you there's nothing, I don't think there's anything there that's surprising that oh my god, I never knew that. It sort of just reinforces things that are probably in the back of your head. So, you know, this whole thing of, you know, all of these, you know, what you learn, you know, your knowledge, so hence reading books like this will change your habits, the skills, you know, what you actually do, you know, and your desires as well. You know, all of these things will influence. And if you go back again, and this is the similarity to this book and the Action Coach, you know, what we teach in Action Coach is, you know, desire is you have, what do I want? Your knowledge is your be, so who do I need to be? Yeah, and the skills is the do. You know, what do I need to do? So it's just another reflection of our, you know, formula for life success. Be, do, have. If you want to have more, yeah, you've got to want it, but then you've got to grow your skills and your knowledge to actually achieve that, and form good habits. This is the key. Is how do we form better habits? So if I took one, a lot of people say I don't have enough time, I want more time. So if time is a better habit, Andy, what would you need to do with those three things in order to get a better habit of time management?
I think the point he makes about time management is that it's not just about having a to-do list or whatever, or actually a lot of it is just about really understanding what your desires are, what your sort of personal mission statement is, so that you can then learn to say no to the things that are not aligned with that.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you can, I mean, at the end of the day, you can never give yourself more time, because there are only so many hours in a day, but you can align the time that you spend to the things that are important to you.
So first thing is, okay, so I want more time, but to do what? What specifically do I need to do? And if you don't want and desire to do that more than what you're already doing, you'll always do the stuff. The rocks, gravel, sand. If you don't put the rocks in, the gravel and sand will always get in there first, because there's always more to do than's ever get done. I saw a documentary once about some unemployed people, and they interviewed one of the chaps. He's probably in his early 20s, been unemployed since he left school, so 4 years. And they sort of asked him, said, well, why don't you go for more interviews? And he said, well, I don't have the time. And it's like, that's that paradigm. In his world, his paradigm is he's too busy doing stuff to go out and get a job, to go for a job interview. Because you'd actually think, where's his desire to get a job? It's probably not there. He's on social benefits. All of his mates are on the dole. His whole family's on the dole. That's his lifestyle. If he actually went and got a job, he would be the outcast from his family unit. So we've got to understand that there are these pulls, these sort of these habits that draw us in, and they're generally there for a reason. But if we don't question it, then we can't overcome it. So we've got to really, I think, that sort of, I think you said about the sort of social mirror. I don't know, you look in the mirror and see, you've got to have that reflective view of yourself. Really look at yourself and go, well, do I see what I want to see? Is this really who I am? Is this really who I want to be? And if it is, then great. Keep feeding. If it's not, then you've got to look at, well, how do I change this? How do I move to the line that I want to be? So this was another part that he talked about. So, Damien, what was your take on that one?
I'll be honest, I kind of was listening to the audiobook and I didn't take it in as much as I could. I was doing it while I left it at the last minute because
That's fine.
so I don't know if I took it all in. So while I was working, VC, think, feel, behave. The one key thing I took out of it was the emotional bank, where you have to put in as much as you take out, or put in more than you take out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see, think, feel, behave. We cannot change our seeing without changing our being. Yeah, very true. Yep.
So if our behaviour is not as we want it to be,
yes,
what would you say this is sort of saying that we need to?
Well, we need to adjust both our values and our core beliefs, in order to adjust our behaviour, which is potentially easier said than done. Or well, not necessarily, it's not impossible, but it does take some work.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's I think it's these two here are key. Oh, so you can't see. So this think and feel.
Yes.
Okay, because something happens, so we get an external input, we can't think. So, you know, if I said to you, don't think of a pink bus, yeah, or pink elephant, you know, you have to think of a pink elephant. So you have to think before we do anything. And that thought naturally drives a feeling, which then leads you to act. So it's this bit here, this filter here, that if we just go straight from a feeling to a behavior, this is what causes us problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I get a feeling, and what we need to put in here is a buffer that says, oh, that's an interesting feeling. Why do I feel that way? So I had a situation the other day. Somebody had written something a bit on social media. Somebody had written something a bit sort of anti me, I suppose. You know, not nastily, but you know. So I read it, and I suddenly had that feeling of anger. Of, oh, right, I'm going to type back now something really obnoxious to really piss him off, because he's pissed me off. Has anybody had? Is it just me that has those moments when you get an email?
No.
I was always told, you write it, but don't press send. So I actually have my whole outbox now is on manual send. So nothing that I write actually is automatically sent. So it can trip me up occasionally, because I can write an email and it doesn't send. But that's my little buffer that says, right, you know, are you sure you want to send that?
Yeah.
So that feeling was, you know, knowing this was, oh, that's interesting. Why am I feeling that way? What's caused me to feel that way? And often, you know, in this particular case, there's a little bit that was actually probably true. If I really took that mirror and looked in the mirror and thought, well, yeah, perhaps I didn't do it in the way I should have done it, and you know, perhaps there was a better way. I've obviously upset this person, and that's never what I mean to do. So maybe I've got to put my hand up and go, okay, fair enough. But certainly not get pulled into that sort of, you know, bitch fight on an email, because that, or certainly on social media, because that never leads to something nice at the end of it. So anybody else sort of, you know, in that sort of inside out, anything stand out to anybody that
the paradigm of, well, I mustn't. Did everyone read the major shift changing paradigm about the captain and the battleships?
The lighthouse.
That's the one. Yes, I didn't want to give it away if you hadn't read it. I think it just highlights how different our ideas can be if we know all the facts.
Yeah.
I don't know if the audio book's slightly different, but it had a story of he sat on a bus and a guy gets on with his kids, they're misbehaving, and then basically he asked them to put them in line and said, oh yeah, maybe I should, but their mother just died an hour ago.
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
So those I mean, the battleship and the lighthouse one, there's if you go on YouTube, there's a really good YouTube video of that, but yeah, it's, you know, and I think we come on to that in actually one of the habits is, you know, seek first to understand before being understood. You know, people act in a certain way because they're going through their own BC think, feel, behave. So there's something that's caused them to behave that way, you know, and, you know, and if we don't know what's causing them to behave that way, it's like this email that was sent to me. Well, you know, you might have had just a really bad day, really fed up, and I've just said something at the wrong place, at the wrong time, and caused that reaction. But, you know, one of the other books we might get onto is The Chimp Paradox, and he talks about the chimp brain, you know, this emotional brain that kicks in, you know, and if you've got two chimps actually having an argument, well, it's just going to end up in banana throwing. So we've got to make sure that we go back into this thinking brain to to move ourselves forwards. So where do we get to? I was just going to go to the I thought was quite interesting was the 3 assets.
3 assets?
Yeah. So page 54, if you've got the book.
Yeah.
Just what your thoughts on that were. So basically, the 3 kinds of assets: the physical, the financial, and the human. So the physical assets are things like lawnmowers.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, piece or that sort of thing. So it was really what how you felt that sort of concept of those 3 things: the physical stuff, obviously the financial, the numbers, and then the human side and the interaction of the 3.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. He was talking about a guy that was efficient, and he put 15 minutes aside to break up with his girlfriend or something, and it's like, you can't do that with humans.
Yeah.
And
it's that sort of treat. We can't treat them all the same. They're different things.
Yeah.
So you've got to and I think I certainly know a lot of people that just treat everything like physical assets. It's you just use them, throw them out, move on to the next thing. Anything else from that one?
I think the assets bit follows on from what he calls the P/PC balance. P standing for production and PC for production capability. And I think the examples he gives after that is about it's no good having the golden goose if you don't look after it, because you don't then get the golden eggs. Certainly, I mean, we're not a household that thinks a lot of physical assets. We basically buy very little, use very little, only what we have to. We detest waste and things like that. But the financial effects of the last 12 years for us have been massively important, and we've had to make really effective use of our assets. And I don't think we've done it the best way. We are improving now. We have Kevin on board. And then the human, but ever since we read How to Win Friends and Influence People, we've realized that the massive effect that if you can help the human, appeal to the human, you're going to be far more effective than any of the other things, really.
No, I think that's that aspect of look, I suppose this is the one that sort of stood out for me, was this sort of, there's always a self-fulfilling prophecy that the way we see others is a reflection of ourselves. Our perceptions are influenced of people, often influence the way we treat them, and the way we treat others influences their behaviour and performance. So certainly if you take this into a family situation, or for us in business, definitely within a business situation, that the way we treat our team members, let's say, is often a reflection of our own abilities, of ourselves. Our perception, our perceptions of these people will influence the way we treat them. So we're starting to treat them perhaps not in the best way, and then the way we treat them will actually reinforce their behaviours. So, Andy, have you got sort of, can you put that into a context that's happened for you in the business, or have you seen it with people you've worked for in the past?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I suppose generically, and I'm struggling to think of a specific example, but you know, if you think somebody is not terribly responsible, then you tend not to give them responsibility, and therefore they don't learn to take responsibility because they're not given the opportunities.
Yeah,
and it just becomes, you know, self-perpetuating.
Yeah. And often that initial, I don't see people taking responsibility, can be down to a reflection of ourselves, that actually we don't do that ourselves. You know, that we don't, you know, and I think there was trusting others to say. I think in my old days was an MD that I used to work with, and he was a sort of he was a control freak. He didn't like, you know, letting go, and he wanted to boss people around, and you know, but all of that really, you know, on reflection, came down to a massive insecurity that he was actually pretty crap, and he didn't really know what he was doing. But he was in a position of seniority. He had to show that he was in charge, and I think because he had that insecurity, that was his way of deflecting from that insecurity. So, you know, so we've got, yeah, this I think, was it Steve, you said, yeah, this is it is very deep and that's why I think it's a book you need to reread, because you just, you know, some of this stuff I'm reading again, I think, oh, I've missed that the first time, because there is a lot of self-reflection, thought that goes into this, you know, if we do want to improve and become a better version of ourselves. And I found that with Think and Grow Rich as well. You know, when you read that book, you know, I think I've read it 3 times now, and you know, each time you just pick up a slightly deeper level, or it means a little bit more to you. So if we look then at the essence of the book, so he talks about this sort of this growth, and how the habits actually build on each other. So they sort of build on, you know, from a transference of dependence, you know, into one of independence into interdependence. Okay, so you know, if you think about a child, you know, is dependent on its parents when it's born, then through its teenage years it becomes independent, so it starts fighting and to get its independence, but ultimately then it has to learn that it has to be interdependent with other people and the people around it. So it's basically that sort of growing up, that sort of, you know, taking control of ourselves and moving up through this, you know, we just put it under a tree, you know, into the tree of life, as it were. So you've got these sort of three things that make this sort of transference from dependence to independence. So being proactive, starting with the end in mind, put first things first. So that's the time management. So that, to me, was that internal side, you know, of really thinking, right, who am I? Am I really clear where I want to go? And am I able then to take that and control where I'm, you know, spending my time? Once we've got that, then we're thinking win-win. So we're trying to find, you know, from other people's perspective. So we're looking at other people and helping them win, to seek first to understand and being understood, and you know, and then synergize, sort of get the synergies together. And then I think the final one, where did you put the? Oh yeah, sharpen the saw, sort of almost sits around all of this. So it's the sort of renewal, it's the sort of continual development that we don't just get to the top of this and then stop. It's we're basically always going through this process, just at a slightly different level. And I think there's an element of that in a business as well. You know, as the business grows, you know, the business is just a group of people. It goes through these stages. You know, we've got to, you know, within the business, we've got to be clear where the business is going to go. We've got to be proactive as a business, not reactive, because it's not going to grow. You know, put first things first, get things right in their place, think win-win with our customers, our suppliers. You know, try and understand our customers more, try and understand where the market's going more, spend more time working on the business than working in the business. And then the synergy then comes where everything starts to work together and we're constantly learning. So, you know, no different really, that growth of us as individuals as a business as well. So let's make a start then. So proactivity, that was habit number 1. So those are 7 habits. There's our 7 habits there. So habit number 1, proactive. Who would like to kick off with what they got from being proactive? Hi, Steve.
I think one of the key for me about this one is sort of taking responsibility. So it's the 2 things that your external circumstances you put yourselves in will influence you and like the people you surround yourselves. But at the same time, you're only in control of your own actions. So things like 2 things in particular is sort of gossip and blame, I think. So pretty much pointless, wasting time blaming other people. And sort of going back to the previous one of self-reflection, often you're quick to blame other people, but if you think about it, it's probably likely there's at least some of the blame that will go on yourself. So I try and look, it's just a natural thing. You always think, oh, this isn't my fault. But I always try and think, okay, is this my fault? Did I mess up here? And sort of almost first of all, and then think, okay, well, maybe not. And like I said, sort of gossip as well. That's just another sort of similar thing. It's not worth worrying about what other people are doing and talking bad about other people behind their back because it's just a waste of time. So that's the sort of 2 things that I think I took from this section.
And I think that second point in today's world is so critical, because the whole of social media is all anti that. I mean, it's so playing against what this is saying in the book. Is we're listening to gossip, we're listening to other people's opinions, you know, and it talks to that sort of circle of influence and circle of concern. You know, you're massively increasing the circle of concern and minimizing your circle of influence, because you know you can't influence. I mean, you can influence social media, but you know, for most of us, it's, you know, you're not going to do that. So yeah, so really interesting. And I do. Did he? I can't remember on that, but did he do the finger pointing? You mentioned that one about blame. When you blame somebody, you point your finger at them, say it's your fault.
Don't think so.
You heard that one?
No, he didn't.
So when you blame somebody and point, so if you do it, get your finger like that and blame me, point at me. Yeah. Okay. So there's one finger pointing at me. How many fingers are pointing at you?
3.
3, and 1 pointing to God. Yeah. So there is that. Yeah, definitely that sort of, yeah. It's easy, and it is easy to blame. You know, that's I think that's the key to this, is the habits of blaming are far easier than the habits of taking responsibility. Yeah, for those that remember are above and below the line, you know, ownership, accountability, responsibility, blame, excuses, denial. Cool, good, thanks, Steve. Gary, what was your top takeaways from this chapter?
I think it's very similar to what's been said, is to take responsibility, but to also, you know, be responsible for moving forward. Like I say, I think he touched on, always trying to be more than what's expected. There's the example of the gopher, the executive with all the, he would just treat people as gophers, and then the one guy that actually went above and beyond, he had the trust, the CEO then had the trust to actually give him more and more responsibility. I think that's, probably true for everybody here, by doing this book club sort of thing. It's the, being proactive about their selves, their own self-improvement thing. So it's, I identified with it. That's probably one of the easier ones. It's good, and I think it's right. Be proactive in most aspects of your life, sort of thing. You can't go wrong.
Did anybody sort of, when it talked about listen to your own languaging, so try and pick up on the languaging you use, whether you're using, if only, I can't, if I had this, if I had that, did that? Or you're perfect?
Far from it. I've always, I do try and think about the language I use, but like everybody, it's very easy to lapse into the reaction mode rather than proactive. But reading this again has really made me stop and think before I open my mouth.
Yeah. And also it's that, and that's why we love that above the line, below the line slide. When people start blaming excuses, you can just you don't have to say anything. I've had clients in the past that put that up on the wall, and then people start sort of blaming and making an excuse. They just sit there and point to the slide and just go, well, is that not just a blame, excuse, denial? Take some responsibility here. The old adage, come to me with solutions, not problems. But if you, the danger is that for us as business owners, business leaders, that does take effort, and it's not always the quickest way to solve the problem. Often, when somebody comes to you with a problem, excuse me, Damien, when somebody comes to you with a problem, what's the quickest way to get it solved?
To work at it as a team.
Work as a team?
As in, if they come to me with a problem, it's like, well, it's everybody can assist in finding a solution. It's not just necessarily maybe it's also being open with if it's a problem for a client, it's being open with them about it as well, not trying to hide it away, show it some light.
Yeah. It's not always the quickest way though, is it?
No.
So if you know the solution, what's the quickest way to solve it?
Tell them what the solution is.
Yeah.
It depends what your problem is.
Yeah. So if they come to you with a problem and you know the answer, the quickest way is for you to solve their problem.
Yeah, although it's not necessarily I think there's different situations in the sense that you can always give them the complete answer, or you can help them work through it. It depends how you want to handle the problem.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is that's the right way of doing it. The way that a lot of people do it is, I'll just do it. I'll just do it.
Yeah.
And then we teach them. So what habit are we teaching them?
Just come to you when they can't do something.
Yeah. Don't think for yourself. When you've got a problem, come to me and I'll fix your problems for you. Okay, fine. That sounds good.
Yeah.
So there is that, we have that as the leaders in our businesses is really to get them to understand this, and for them to come and be proactive, not just be reactive. And this is the interesting thing what I've found with this book is, it's great. I can read this book. I can know all this stuff. But if no one else does, then yeah, it's not really helping me, because they're just sort of stuck in their own little paradigms. Anything else? Where do we get to, Andy? What's anything from this chapter for you that stood out? What did you make of the circle of influence and the circle of concern?
Yes, I thought that was interesting. It makes sense. Yes, typically you're concerned about all sorts of things that you can't influence, but the important thing is to focus your efforts on the things that you can. It's interesting that he also talked about sort of situations where people's circle of influence generally sort of grows and grows and grows, and then he sort of said, well, for some people they'll sort of retire, and then actually their circle of influence might actually become larger than their circle of concern, and kind of what a bad thing that was. Some of that I kind of knew what he was getting at, but I didn't necessarily agree with everything that he said, just because I think you do have to, and as he says elsewhere, you have to prioritize. So in the instance where somebody is retired, they might still have influence over the people that they've been working with previously, and they may have some concern for the company that they've left, but really should they be trying to influence what they've left behind? I would say probably not. They need to find new things to focus on, and they need to let the people in the organization they've left kind of step up. So yeah, it was.
I think that's what he was talking about.
I knew what he was getting at, but I didn't feel that it worked in all circumstances.
But was that not what he was saying on page 85, that sometimes your circle of influence is bigger than your circle of concern?
Well, that's exactly right. But he said what a tragedy that was, and my point was that I felt that sometimes you would be right to not concern yourself with some things in your circle of influence, just because you've only got so much bandwidth.
Yeah. I suppose it's how you deal with, I'm not sure he sort of says how you deal with that situation where, because the position of wealth, role, and relationships are circumstances which person's circle of influence is larger than his circle of concern. This situation reflects a self-inflicted emotional myopia. So they may have to prioritize the use of their influence. Proactive people have a circle of concern at least as big as their circle of influence, accepting responsibility to use. So I suppose in a way that what he's trying to say there is that sometimes that you influence. I suppose it's if you looked at film stars and football players, their circle of influence is far bigger than their circle of concern.
Mm-hmm.
And they do things that young kids are seeing, and and it's almost like, well, I don't care if they sort of see me. They've got to take some responsibility for the fact that actually their circle of influence is bigger than what they care about, and they need to, they need to work on that. Otherwise, they are going to lead people into bad things.
Yeah. No, that example is a good one, and that makes perfect sense. I guess my mind sort of went off down other avenues, and I was sort of, challenging it in other scenarios, sort of former presidents and things like that. Should they really, they've got to pick a few things and focus on those, rather than, still trying to run the country after they're no longer in power.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. You've got to try and match your circle of influence to your circle of concern, ideally. That's potentially where it would be in its sort of. I mean, whether it would ever match, I don't think it would ever match. It's either one way or the other way. But I think there are, even when you've left power, you've got to understand that there is that influence that people do look to, and you have that sense of responsibility for it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
you can't say, well, I never asked for this. Well, tough, you've got it. You've got to now deal with it. And you look at the really great people that have come through this. They have understood that. They have understood that it is beyond their circle of concern. Focus might be here, but they do influence a lot wider, and they get that balance. Not perfect, but they get that balance really well. And I think that's when we see them as being, great people. It was. I think it was. Have you watched the Mandela film on the rugby team?
So good.
Yeah, just fantastic, wasn't it? And I think that it was an element of that in what he did there around the rugby, and saying, look, our influence is to the white sort of generation, and rugby is their game, and we're not going to do the things that we could do, because that influence, that is going to be our concern, to bring these guys on board, and get the country behind the whole country behind the rugby team. And he did the hard things. I can't remember what he actually sort of did, but it was the hard way of doing it rather than the easy, the right way of doing it rather than the easy way of doing it. So expanding that circle of influence, I think that's about sort of growing in our roles. What else is out for me on this one? So our choices.
There was the bit on, what was it, keeping commitments. Making and keeping commitments. Yeah, I mean, I felt that was a kind of a core part of it, and certainly a core part of integrity. But it's raised in this chapter.
Yeah, I mean, it's that does. That does certainly, for me, hits home that how rare that can be. Sometimes, again, I've got to be careful. My paradigm is, but a bit like my sort of seminar last night. 12 people have booked. They've actually gone to the effort of booking on, and then 3 people turn up. So that's 9 people that made a commitment to do something and then chose not to do it. Now, there could be all sorts of things that happened, half term, etc., that got in the way. But I do see that a lot. That certainly with business people is, they make commitments and then they don't stick to them because they're in that reactive. Something else reactive comes along and off they go and do that. And it's a dangerous habit, I think, that if you feel that is okay to keep doing that, you never get out of that cycle. You're stuck in it. And if you're doing it over here, you'll be doing it with your team members. You'll be setting meetings with team members, and then not showing up or showing up late for the meetings with team members. So this is why you've got to hold the mirror up, or have the mirror held up for you, to see that look, every action you take has a consequence, whether you like it or not. So same as, did you watch the sort of the dog trainers, Caesar, what's his face, who is the big dog trainer? And there's a cat one now as well, isn't there? A cat behaviourist guy. It's amazing when you work at home and you've got a wife that's ill, how much trash TV you end up sort of being influenced by. But they say, there's no such thing as a bad animal, bad pet. It's always the owner has influenced the animal to do what it does.
Yeah.
But they don't see it. They see them. Oh no, it's not me. It's I've got a difficult pet, and he comes in within a couple of hours. He's sorted out those problems. So if we're doing it influencing pets and animals, then we're doing that with our children. We're doing that with our friends. We're certainly doing that within our organisations. Cool. Okay. Well, blimey, we got to chapter 1 then. This book might take a little bit longer to go through. So where have we all got to? So Sabrina, you said you got to chapter 3.
Yes, I've got to the end of the third habit, but it all needs rereading. Yeah. Okay,
Andy, where are you to?
About the same actually. This time round, I've read it previously.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Gary,
No, I've finished chapter 3 as well.
You've done chapter 3, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the audiobook and the book, so I've listened to the audiobook about twice already, I think. But this time I'm not far. I'm just the first chapter at the moment.
First chapter, okay. Damien?
I'm about halfway through the audiobook, and I've read the 2 foreword sections in the book, and I want to properly read it because don't feel I'm taking it in on audio. Okay.
So shall we? What should we commit to having done by end of the month then? Do you think you could do the whole thing by the end of the month? I think it's tough to read the whole thing or to actually talk about the whole thing in one session. Should we do to chapter 4?
Yeah.
So give you a chance just to reread it, go over it a couple of times. So we'll do to chapter 4 next time, and then we'll have the December one to finish, because December 1 will be early anyway, because obviously it'll have to be before Christmas. So we can get that in, and we'll get the book finished before Christmas. So
just to clarify, is that habit 4 or part 4?
Habit 4.
Right.
Yeah, we'll go to habit 4.
Okay. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Cool. Good stuff. Excellent. Well, so I'm glad you're enjoying it, and so it is one of those books that is definitely worth going through, a few times and picking more up. But do monitor yourselves. Pick yourselves up on some of these things, and don't worry about. I think it's good when you find yourself doing it the wrong way, catching yourself, with a bad habit, because if you can see yourself doing a bad habit, then you can change. If you can't see the bad habit, then you're never going to change it. And also look out for other people that are doing it. Don't pick up on them. Don't point the finger at them unless they've read the book, because that would just get you into trouble. But just be more aware of where people are and not live into the habits, and sort of start thinking, okay, what would the consequence of that be? Good stuff. Well, great to have you with us, guys, and have a good few weeks, and I'll see most of you pretty soon. Take care.
Yeah, take care.
Have a great weekend.
Take care. Bye.